Mother, save me. Father, save me.
The gods aren't down here. It's the six of us, you hear me?
So I recently lost my job after 18 years in the 2D animation industry, which got me thinking, what else am I passionate about? For me, I think my passion for animation actually stems from a broader passion for storytelling in general. So obviously, the first topic I'm going to cover is about a show that's years old and no one wants to be reminded even exists. For full disclosure, I didn't watch Season 8. I didn't care for the show after Season 4. In fact, in the run-up to Season 8's release, I ended up buying the 7th season box set at a discount since I knew there was nothing in Season 8 that was going to be worth seeing. So when Season 8 came out and it sucked, it didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was how many people were surprised. But this video isn't going to cover everything wrong with Game of Thrones. There are plenty of videos about that, and I'm almost a decade late to contribute anything new to that conversation. Instead, I want to focus on one episode specifically. An episode that remains popular despite the show's decline, the Battle of the Bastards. I'm not going to argue its execution, but like so many things nowadays, the work of directors, set designers, stunt coordinators, fight choreographers, visual effects artists, camera crews, and costume designers is flawless artistry in service of hollow writing. So, for those of you who haven't had this scene living in your head rent-free for 9 years, we should probably start with a refresher. By the beginning of this episode, Jon Snow has rallied several armies in an attempt to retake his home Winterfell from Ramsay Snow, in hopes of unifying the North in time to defend Westeros from the White Walkers. On top of holding Winterfell, Ramsay also has a hostage, Rickon Stark, who at this point Jon knows as his half-brother. Jon's army is outnumbered, and his enemy holds a fortified castle, so he reasons that the best option is for him to hold position and hope that the optics of the situation force Ramsay to meet him in the field. On the day of the battle, as Jon's army approaches Winterfell, Ramsay releases Rickon, who then runs towards Jon as Ramsay fires arrows at him. Jon rides out alone to intercept Rickon, but Ramsay finally lands a killing blow before he can reach him. Enraged, Jon charges, forcing his army to follow suit. Now that we've covered what happened, what's wrong with it? Well, right after the battle planning meeting, his sister Sansa advises Jon to resign himself to the fact that Rickon will not survive this situation, and to not let himself be manipulated by Ramsay.
What should we do? How do we get Rickon back?
We'll never get him back. Rickon is Ned Stark's true-born son, which makes him a greater threat to Ramsay than you, a bastard, or me, a girl. As long as he lives, Ramsay's claim to Winterfell will be contested, which means he won't live long.
We can't give up on our brother.
Listen to me, please.
She also reminds him that she knows Ramsay well, and warns him not to do what Ramsay wants.
Just don't do what he wants you to do.
That's good advice.
You think that's obvious?
Well, it is a bit obvious.
Jon, of course, ends up ignoring this, and ends up doing exactly what Ramsay wants him to do, despite how obvious he thinks this advice is. Next, on the day of the battle, when Ramsay releases Rickon, Jon rides out alone to intercept him. This is already a bad decision. He's allowing himself to be drawn out alone into range of enemy fire instead of sending out a rider. He's emotionally compromised, which is a point I'll address later, but before we continue, I'd like to put a fine point once again on the fact that the technical execution of this show was great. Very quickly, because plenty of videos have already mentioned this before, the use of the audience's innate knowledge of the rule of threes in order to surprise us with the fourth killing arrow is great direction. My problem is with what follows. Jon is now alone, between his own army and Ramsay's. He stares Ramsay down, boiling with rage, and with the lives of several armies depending on him, and for whom he is responsible, not to mention the fate of Westeros, in the balance, he suicide charges forward alone. His confused, outnumbered army rushes to back him, abandoning their plan and plunging into a chaotic melee and certain death. I think it'd be a good idea to back up and look at the strategy behind the battle in the first place. Like I said before, Jon's entire strategy revolves around the idea that Ramsay looks like a coward hiding in his castle, and he hopes this will force him to come out and meet him on open ground. The problem with this is Ramsay killing Rickon completely reverses this. By executing Jon's brother in plain sight and then retreating, Ramsay transforms the narrative. Now it's Jon who looks weak and afraid to act if he holds his position after watching Ramsay kill his own family member. Ramsay no longer needs to preserve his reputation by leaving the safety of Winterfell, even though for some reason the writers have him do it anyway. He's already demonstrated his dominance. The writers trapped themselves. Honoring Jon's character development, which I'll go into detail about, would mean allowing him to look like a coward to every witness on that battlefield. Now Jon's strategy is completely shot. He can't wait for Ramsay to come out and meet him anymore. What blows my mind is that even after Sansa warned him about this, Jon didn't take Ramsay possibly killing his brother into consideration when he's forming his plan. It's one of, if not literally the only play Ramsay had. I realize this is likely because they wanted to make Sansa look like a stronger leader than Jon for plot reasons. But just like with the death of Littlefinger in Season 7, we watch characters break character to shoehorn a plot that doesn't fit. The problem is that the optics of hiding in a castle was weak bait to begin with. You don't look weak taking a defensive position in a castle. That's what castles are for. King Robert had a monologue once about how his people would turn on him if he were to hide in his castle in the face of an invading army, seeing him as an absentee king.
Let's say Viserys Targaryen lands with 40,000 Dothraki screamers at his back. We hole up in our castles. Wise move. Only a fool would meet the Dothraki in an open field. They leave us in our castles. They go from town to town, looting and burning, killing every man who can't hide behind a stone wall, stealing all our crops and livestock, enslaving all our women and children. How long do the people of the Seven Kingdoms stand behind their absentee king? Their cowardly king hiding behind high walls? When did the people decide that Viserys Targaryen is the rightful monarch after all?
The problem is, in that scenario, the invading army would be attacking and starving his people. That is something Jon cannot do if he hopes to earn back the loyalty of the banners that currently stand behind Ramsay, let alone this being something Jon would do. He either needed better bait to get Ramsay to fight him on the open field, or he needed an entirely different strategy. But an entirely different strategy wouldn't have given us the epic spectacle the showrunners wanted to give us. I knew the show was getting pretty bad at this point. I mean, in just the episode prior, after inexplicably exposing herself to multiple stab wounds to the stomach, Arya then proceeds to have a full-speed foot chase with the waif. But that shot, where Jon is standing lifting his sword while Ramsay's army comes down on him, I was just too angry at him to care. In fact, I was definitely looking at the screen, but I just stopped watching. I just despised Jon for forgetting all the lessons he'd learned and all the proselytizing he'd done, and most of all, for throwing away the lives of the men he asked to follow him. And then he ends up being rewarded for it, which undermines the themes of the show. In every season up until the Battle of the Bastards, Jon learns to sacrifice something new that he values for the sake of the greater good. In Season 1, when he learns that Ned Stark, who he thinks is his father, has been killed, Jon tries to abandon the Watch and ride south. His friends stop him, and Commander Mormont dresses him down the following morning, depicted in this scene featuring Kit Harington carrying on the long tradition of good-looking nice guys who can't act.
They killed my father.
Oh, and you're going to bring him back to life, are you? No? Good. We've had enough of that sort of thing. Beyond the wall, the Rangers are reporting whole villages abandoned. At night, they see fires blazing in the mountains from dusk until dawn. Because of Pike's men discovered 4 blue-eyed corpses, unlike us. They were wise enough to burn them. Do you think your brother's war is more important than ours?
No.
When dead men, and worse, come hunting for us in the night, Do you think it matters who sits on the Iron Throne?
No.
This is the first time he's introduced to the idea that serving a greater purpose might mean setting aside personal desires, even when it comes to family, including vengeance for a family member's death. But okay, this first lesson, though it's a direct one-to-one of his motivation during the Battle of the Bastards, has yet to be internalized. It needs to be forced upon him at this point. We haven't seen him make this decision for himself yet. Let's move on to Egret. He then falls in love with a wildling woman, and we get a little Romeo and Juliet. Pulled between the decision of honoring his Night's Watch vows and pursuing his relationship with her, he now chooses duty over his personal desires of his own volition. He has learned. Now, as the leader of the Night's Watch, and in the interest of saving the wildlings north of the Wall, so as not to feed the White Walker army and instead gain allies against them, he travels to Hardhome to meet with the wildling leaders there and convince them to come south of the Wall. It's a hugely unpopular decision with the men of the Night's Watch. There are generations of bad blood between the Night's Watch and the wildlings, and convincing the wildlings to trust him is a true test of his leadership skills and the lessons he learned from Mormont.
I lost my father, my uncle, and 2 brothers fighting the damn crows.
I'm not asking you to forget your dead. I'll never forget mine.
I lost 50 brothers the night that Mance attacked the wall. But I'm asking you to think about your children now. They'll never have children of their own if we don't band together. The long night is coming, and the dead come with it. No clan can stop them.
The free folk can't stop them. The Night's Watch can't stop them. And all the Southern Kings can't stop them.
Only together. All of us. And even then it may not be enough, but at least we'll give the fuckers a fight.
With Tormund's help, he's able to convince the wildlings to put their grievances aside and come south of the Wall to save their people. The whole reason the wildling armies are even there at the Battle of the Bastards later is because of his insistence that the greater good outweighs personal, family, and tribal vendettas. And once he's put them all there, he dooms them all by hypocritically doing exactly what he preached to them not to do. And finally, Jon even turns down the one thing he's always wanted: legitimacy. Stannis Baratheon offers to name him a true-born Stark. This is the big one. Since the beginning, this has been the core anxiety that has defined his character. He has always felt like a second-class citizen next to his brothers, even to the point of not appreciating his privilege over most people, despite his bastard status. It's how we're introduced to him. He was even willing to give this up for the greater good. So, back to the Battle of the Bastards. In his mind, he threw all those sacrifices away, let alone the lives of the men that are following him. Running to Robb's side, his love with Egret, his legitimacy as a Stark, he threw them away for nothing. Because despite being willing to sacrifice all of that, what did he eventually fail to sacrifice? The life of his brother? No. Vengeance for his brother? Not even that, because he was more likely to exact vengeance not suicide charging. Simply a temper tantrum, motivated by vengeance, which is the same impulse he asked the wildlings to set aside at Hardhome. There are a few counter-arguments I've heard to this before that I'd like to address. The first one is one I've heard in defense of this episode, and in defense of characters in other stories. I would have done the same thing. The thing is, Jon Snow isn't you. He's lived different lessons. That's why you write arcs. So people don't just act like a general human, but like that specific person. Fiction is empathy. You're meant to understand why this person would or wouldn't make that choice, regardless of whether or not you as a viewer would. You lived their motivations and learned their lessons, all from the safety of your living room. What was the point of his entire character arc up until that point, which is exclusively a mixture of learning, preaching, and practicing this one lesson, if he was only going to abandon it when it mattered most? Another argument I hear is that he was emotionally compromised. Yes, Jon is devastated watching Rickon die. But that's exactly when character growth matters most. And it's a test of a good leader. Anyone can make good decisions when it's easy. The whole point of a character arc is to show how someone responds differently to the same triggers after they've learned and grown. Jon in Season 1 would charge impulsively after the death of a family member. The Battle of the Bastards tests Jon with the exact same emotional trigger, but Jon in Season 6 reacts exactly the same way, telling us that he hasn't learned anything. He should have known better. That's what makes it character development rather than just character events. And the last counterargument, people aren't perfect. Even if it's completely understandable to be hypocritical and flawed, we aren't talking about a person here. This is a character in a story near the end of his arc. His actions need to give meaning to everything that's happened up until then. He needs to serve the themes of the story. If the theme is not about putting aside our personal agendas for the sake of the greater good,
Shut it!
And is instead about hypocrisy and failure, we don't learn that lesson by then having Sansa secretly summon the Deus Ex Machina of the Vale to sweep in and save Jon from the consequences of his actions. Game of Thrones entered a fantasy landscape still living under Tolkien's shadow. Ned Stark embodied the kind of honor those stories idealized. But right from the start, George R.R. Martin made his premise clear. This isn't Lord of the Rings. Here, real-world politics rule. There is no good king ending where everyone lives happily ever after. Actions have consequences. Impractical idealism gets people killed. Ned's death established that honor alone isn't enough. The story becomes a question about power, which is still relevant today. Given that honor alone isn't enough, who can survive the Game of Thrones, let alone survive it with their integrity intact? Jon was supposed to be the answer to that question. Someone who learned to balance honor with pragmatism. Instead, they regressed Jon back to Ned 2.0 and rewarded him for it. I'm going to bring up Book Jon, not because I think all adaptations should remain faithful to their source material, but as a contrast to Show Jon, and to demonstrate why Book Jon fits the story better. A prime example of the difference between the two is Mance's baby. Like in the show, Stannis defeats Mance Rayder, leader of the Wildlings, at the Night's Watch wall. He is taken prisoner. Stannis and Melisandre are looking for the power found in King's blood, realized by burning royal bloodlines at the stake. In the books, Mance has a baby. Jon knows that Stannis will demand that the baby be burned to death, so he secretly commands Gilly, who also has a newborn, to swap her child for Mance's, and commands that she be sent away. To put a fine point on it, he goes as far as to force her to hold her hand to a candle's flame to emphasize how horrible a death it would be for the child, and when she still refuses, he even threatens to kill her child the same day that Stannis kills Mance's son. Jon is racked with guilt over these manipulations, but these are the decisions that George R.R. Martin insists that Tolkien handwaves.
One thing that I am trying to get at in the books, a political aspect, if you would, is to kind of show that this stuff is hard. I mean, I think an awful lot of fantasy, and even some great fantasy, falls into the mistake of assuming that the good man will be a good king. That is, all that is necessary is to be like a decent human being, and then when you're king, of course, everything will go swimmingly. And even Tolkien, who is I think my respect for Tolkien is second to none, and all modern fantasy flows from Tolkien. But there's an unspoken assumption in his books there that, Return of the King, Aragorn is the king now, everything will be hunky-dory, the land will prosper and it'll be wonderful and the crops will be good and there will be justice for all and the enemies will be defeated. And, you never actually get into the nitty-gritty of Aragorn ruling and, what is his tax policy and how does he feel about crop rotation and, how does he handle land disputes between two nobles, both of whom think that they should have this particular village, so they take turns burning it down in order to establish this claim. These are the hard parts of ruling, and be it in the Middle Ages or now. And of course, it's not enough to be a good man to be an effective ruler, and it never has been.
It's impossible to imagine Shojan doing anything like what Bookjohn did. I imagine none of this characterization was in the show for the same reason Tyrion's arc was kept as innocent as possible, to keep their protagonists likable, and in so doing, dumbing the characters and the story down. But that's okay. Shojan isn't Bookjohn. He doesn't have to be. What he does have to be is true to his arc within this version of the story, and he has to serve the theme of the story. And as a microcosm of the seasons to come, and how they prioritize spectacle and convenient plot lines over character and theme, he does neither of these.